Hey, I'm Yuri. I just passed the AWS Solutions Architect Associate Certificate and the exam. And this is kind of like a video to help you understand what it is about, is it worth it, and how do you pass the exam in the end. Work as a solution architect, I already had some architecture experience, but my work also offers me a full Udemy course. Every Udemy course I want to follow, actually, basically. I take stuff from Mirax's course and some practice exams. Stuff from Mirax's course is definitely one of the top resources that made me help pass this exam. So, are the learning goals actually useful? So I decided to split this up a bit in the actual domains, and one thing that's not the domains, but I do feel it's a big separate part of what you're learning. So the first thing, if you have experience as an architect, this is the way I would recommend you to learn. So you follow the domain structure of AWS, and which is design secure architectures, which is definitely useful to learn. And you also sort of need to understand AIM principles, least privilege, and other stuff. You have design resilient architectures. You have design high performance architectures and design cost optimized architectures. My personal focus usually when I work with AWS is kind of the last one, which is a cost optimized architecture, and it may actually involve hybrid solutions that don't really depend on AWS, but they can. They usually I use AWS for S3 bucket storage, but there are other options as well. So the last part is that I just described as databases in AIM. There are a lot of different database types on AWS, but I mean there's absolutely a lot. So you have, of course, DynamoDB, Elasticache, Aurora, Amazon Neptune. You have the NoSQL databases. I think Amazon Neptune is kind of interesting because it's a serverless graph database. DocumentDB. We have various things. We use a lot of S3 backends as well. But I think there are definitely very much different options. I personally did really like one idea of it, but the most thing you're gonna work is with RDS. In my experience, or Aurora, which makes sense. You may work with Amazon TimeStream for IoT and so on. But that's definitely the things you're gonna choose between. On the exam, you rarely would be seeing something else. US and use AWS for example for the storage buckets. Not really specified, but definitely something I did really learn a lot of was databases. Another AWS database style, another database style. And identity and access management is important. Works quite different on AWS and other platforms, but or has equivalents that are different. AWS Cognito and identity aware proxy are kind of similar in some senses, but they're also very different. So, full disclosure on that, I'm also a Google Cloud certified architect. And there are some differences in these exams. So, what I mostly did learn on these exams were services and technical implementations. And not that much on stuff that I find more relevant as solution architect, and that is interaction. How do you work with the business? I think the AWS Well Architected framework is interesting. That doesn't come that often back in this exam. So I would say this is not the best architecture exam, but this is definitely a good exam if you want or have to work with AWS. So open source rebranded, and that's a general critique I have on AWS and the cloud industry in general. Redis and other open source projects are basically sort of obscured. and specifically Redis, I can say for AWS, it's obscured in Elasticache, and it's not that if you use Elasticache as a cache, you can already see that it's a Redis server, but definitely for this exam, you need to say Elasticache, not Redis, for cases you normally would say, oh yeah, I would use a Redis instance for that. I think one place where this is actually more visible is with all the AI services being rolled out in the cloud right now. It's way too often ends up just being another Jupyter notebook, and you opening Jupyter notebook is in the end very clearly not obscured, but it's hidden behind like the name Vertex or Bedrock or whatever you have on the cloud at this point. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing that you end up in Jupyter notebooks, because in the end that is standardization. That's something we all love. Like, it doesn't really matter what cloud you work. You can work with Jupyter notebooks, you can work on every cloud and work with AI. But let's credit it for what it is and say, okay, this is a Jupyter notebook instead of something highly specialized, which then it appears not to be. Not just AWS, Microsoft does this as well, Google Cloud does this as well, but for example, I think Elasticache is a good one where Redis can be a solid basis, and or the DynamoDB is, I think, also an Elasticache. Look, it's not bad that these are standards and they're commonly used, so I would guess, yeah, you should offer this as a service managed. But I do feel like about Redis that Redis is such a simple service that's just called Redis. There's no need to do a re-implementation of it and manage it for you, and then like sort of like get the branding out of it as well. Like, Redis is a lovely contribution, and one of the problems from this is like you get this hyper profit driven things around good open source projects. And this is a general critique of the cloud industry. And one of the things that I didn't notice in the exams, AI is actually just no part of those exams in the end. But on AWS, on Google Cloud, on OpenShift AI, all these places have AI in one form or another. And if you go deep enough, quite often you end up in Jupyter Notebook. I do find that a bit of a problem, because if you have good services and you base them on open source software, be open about you base them, that doesn't necessarily mean that all things are just a Jupyter notebook in the end, but a lot of that is. But I do think this is standardization. I think we should credit it as one. So we're almost at the end of the video. I got a Substack which I'm gonna offer practice exams on. Feel free to watch and join my Substack, to subscribe. The practice exams are in the paid tier, and this is not for the reason that I don't want you to have free exams, but I do need to see. I'm trying to find a profitable model for myself to keep this content going.